Hey friends, it's SGT here, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have on the line Andrew Gavin Marshall. He's an independent researcher and writer and contributor over the years to Globalresearch.ca, one of my favorite alternative media websites. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I just want to alert the audience to how I sort of discovered you, with credit to Jim Puplava, who did an outstanding interview with you related to the Bilderberg Group. And it was just a gripping interview. So I'm going to link to that interview below in the more information section so people can listen to that again instead of just us trying to duplicate that interview. Before we talk about the reason that I wanted to have you on today, before we talk about the 10th anniversary of 9/11, let's talk a little bit about globalization and this move toward a one-world government. In the interview with Puplava, you guys talked about whether or not the Bilderberg Group is an altruistic group or conspiratorial, in the sense that their plan being carried out behind the scenes is to move us into a one-world government so that they have ultimate control as these powers behind the curtain basically engineer society.
I think that the correct C word in describing Bilderberg is not conspiracy but consensus. Ultimately, it's a think tank which gathers roughly 130 Atlantic elites, so from Western Europe and North America in particular. And the idea is to bring them together once a year. The meetings are secret. Media representatives, in terms of CEOs of major media corporations like the Washington Post, etc., they're invited, but they don't report on the meetings. There's press from The Economist and the Financial Times, two major elite papers, which are present, but again, they don't report on the meetings. There is a media blackout. It's understood that if you're invited, you do not speak about what is discussed, or else you won't be invited again. However, there is enough information in the public sphere to find out what they're doing. Former members have spoken out, have discussed the ideas and the issues that are brought up in these meetings and what the general ideology of the Bilderberg Group is. It's very well documented. It's more just in terms of bringing these people together to form consensus. Now, there isn't, you'll hear from various Bilderberg members, Henry Kissinger, etc., that when the idea of a conspiracy theory is raised, they simply state, it's just an informal gathering where we bring together, industrialists, bankers, and politicians and academics to discuss issues in such a way that they wouldn't be inclined to discuss in public, so that you can be more frank, so that you're not afraid of being quoted or misquoted. So it's apparently, according to members, a forum for frank discussion. In a sense, that's correct, but it's also missing the forest for the trees. Yes, it encourages frank discussion, but it's also secret because of what they're discussing. They don't have the interests of the 6.8 billion people on Earth at hand. That's not what they're discussing. They're discussing the interests of the 130 people present at the meeting. And one former member, Will Hutton, who was the CEO of the Observer, a major British paper, once referred to them as the high priests of globalization. Now, this group includes one of its founding members, who is still essentially a steering committee member, is David Rockefeller.
Sure.
Patriarch of the Rockefeller family, former chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, now J.P. Morgan Chase, former chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations, founder of the Trilateral Commission, founder of the America Society, Society of the Americas, etc. The list goes on. But you also have several other bankers, the CEOs and chairman of the top oil companies such as Total SA, Eni, Royal Dutch Shell, British Petroleum, once in a while Exxon. You have representatives from major banks, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan,
Rothschild and Sons.
Yes, absolutely. You always have Franco Barnaby there, who is the vice chairman of Rothschild Europe, a Rothschild member of the Rothschild family, was a former steering committee, and this is all on their official website. Mm-hmm. And you also have European monarchs, such as the Dutch Queen, Beatrix.
Right.
Her father, Prince Bernard of the Netherlands, who was incidentally a
Nazi
SS officer.
Right. Right.
He was one of the founders of the Bilderberg Group.
Right. Well,
and he was its chairman for a number of years until a scandal broke out regarding corruption in 1976 in charges with corrupt deals with Lockheed Martin, and that was the only year that Bilderberg never had a meeting.
Right. Now, you note that, these are 130 of the most elite people on the planet, essentially. I mean, you're talking about the top of the top. These are the people that pick presidents, are they not? Because there are reports that Obama and Hillary Clinton were both called in front of one of the Bilderberg Group meetings back in 2008, and there's reports that Rick Perry attended, too. And it seems to me that these people are hand-picked. Now, are these the puppet masters?
In a sense, yes. They certainly play that part very well. And the Rick Perry was certainly, he was confirmed as having attended a Bilderberg conference. That was reported in Texas media at the time of his going to the meeting. The Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama possible attendance is a little more mysterious, but I think it's fairly evident that they did attend that meeting in 2008 for a number of reasons. First of all, Bilderberg generally has 3 out of every 4 years of its meetings are held in Europe, and the 4th year is in North America. Now, in 2006, they had a meeting right outside of Ottawa, Canada. But in 2008, they decided to change up the schedule in light of the American presidential elections and have a meeting in Virginia. Now, Obama and Hillary happened to be campaigning right in the area, and there was an incident, which you can actually watch newsreel of it on YouTube, where Obama's campaign...
they ditched the press on the tarmac, didn't they?
Absolutely. Like, they got onto the plane. They were loaded onto the plane with his press secretary. The plane took off without Obama, and the press was actually very angry and asking a lot of questions to his press secretary because this is unprecedented. And what his press secretary told them was that there were people who desired to have meetings with Obama, and he went to go have meetings with these people. He would not suggest who these people were, where these meetings were, etc. There were also some reports of people working in the hotel where the Bilderberg meeting took place of having spotted Hillary Clinton. And so it seems pretty clear that he attended that meeting. And it's an important thing to do in terms of if you're a Bilderberg member, you want to have the politicians, up-and-coming politicians, attend your meetings. You want to have discussions with them and hear their ideas and see if they're in line with your ideas. And certainly if you like them, you have the means as the CEO of Deutsche Bank or J.P. Morgan or Shell, you have the means to help advance these politicians. It's I support you, you support us. It's a two-way street. You'll have an excellent career if you advocate ideas like this. Bill Clinton attended before becoming president while he was governor of Arkansas. He was invited by his friend, who's a member of the steering committee, and he was introduced. He really impressed everyone, and 2 years later he was president. In terms of Canadian prime ministers, you've had virtually every single Canadian prime minister since Trudeau, if not earlier, attend a meeting before becoming prime minister.
Right. Jim Tucker has done a lot of work reporting about the Bilderberg Group for decades now, and the mainstream media always denied that the Bilderberg Group even existed at all. Same with the Council on Foreign Relations. I want to bridge over to 9/11 because for the people that think that if 9/11 was a false flag operation, if the official story that we're told isn't 100% true, then these people like to say the mainstream media or a young up-and-coming reporter would be all over that because it's the news story of the century. And you even said in the interview with James Puplava, you said just look at the boards of News Corp, of Washington Post, of the New York Times. And on just for example, the board of News Corp, you see Rothschilds and Sons. You see J.P. Morgan Chase.
People from J.P. Morgan Chase. Yeah. The former Spanish prime minister who is essentially a neo-fascistic prime minister, and they have tons of connections like this. The Washington Post is essentially a billionaire's newspaper. You go to their boards and you'll see, it used to have Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett, but Buffett's company is the majority shareholder in the Washington Post, actually. The papers, you go to the New York Times, board of directors, and you see bankers, industrialists, many heads of foundations, which is very important because the foundations are essentially going back even beyond Bilderberg. The major philanthropic foundations are essentially like engines of social engineering. They're ultimately more influential than the Bilderberg Group itself, since they were patrons of and remain patrons of the Bilderberg Group.
Right.
They engineer ideology and create consensus. They're designed for social control. So the heads of the foundations interchange with university administration, the heads of universities, with the heads of the think tanks, and in the media itself. So there's a very revolving door. It's not a matter of the media, it's its own separate entity where every journalist is allowed to pursue their own ideas and investigations free of interference. It's a myth. That hasn't been the case in the United States in roughly 150 years. And the New York Times was actually created to counter that type of journalism, muckraker journalism it was called.
Right.
The New York Times was, and the Washington Post itself. The Washington Post was bought by one of the founding directors of the Federal Reserve. And then it went down throughout that family. And Katharine Graham was the CEO for decades, and then now her son is the CEO, and they always attend the Bilderberg Conference. And they're also very integrated with the intelligence apparatus itself. The Washington Post has had very close connections with the CIA for decades, since the CIA's founding, as well as the New York Times, Time Magazine, Newsweek. These are all publications that have very well documented relationships with the CIA itself.
Yeah, the Mockingbird media, essentially.
Absolutely.
Well, let me read this. I know people have heard this before, but before we bridge to 9/11, I just want people to have this perspective. David Rockefeller, the founder of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Rockefeller Foundation, its catchphrase is for the benefit of mankind, the Rockefeller Foundation. That's hilarious. You noted in the interview that it's actually for the benefit of the Rockefellers, but this is David's quote. He says, quote, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years." So here's the point. We're moving into the 10th anniversary of 9/11, which I think for those of us who are awake, I would call the ultimate lie. What is your take on this 10th anniversary of 9/11, and why is it that we can't seem to get the light of truth shone on what actually happened that day?
Well, the 9/11 Truth Movement has made a lot of progress. There are certainly developments in that area. But again, it's not common knowledge. It's really something that you have to individually and personally investigate for yourself. I mean, in regards to 9/11, there's many theories about what did happen, the specifics, how everything was done. Ultimately, that remains unknown. It's inconclusive. But what is, I think, incontrovertible is we know what didn't happen, and that is the official story. The official story can be proven, without a doubt, with publicly available information, to be an utter and complete lie.
Yes, the ultimate conspiracy theory in itself.
Absolutely, that 19 hijackers operated off a laptop and a computer in a cave in Afghanistan were able to outmaneuver the most powerful defense system in the world's history, no doubt.
Right.
And the official story defies the laws of physics itself, so it's not a far cry to see that it defies many other aspects as well. But it is a myth, and I think in time that will become better known. But these things also have a tendency. I mean, you just look at the JFK assassination. The myth still pervades. The myth is still present.
Right.
Anybody who looks into that in any independent view, will ultimately conclude that the official story is again an utter fable. But I think that the pressure needs to maintain and accelerate in terms of exposing 9/11 as a lie, because the information is there. It just has to get out to the public. It has to be consumed. It has to be analyzed further. We need more people on the inside itself to come out and start talking. And of course, there's always the risk that there will be another event, another catastrophic and catalyzing event, as the Project for a New American Century referred to it.
Yeah, that's right.
And in that instance, 9/11 will move to the background. And I think that that's also a great risk at present time, simply because it has been 10 years, and that's no longer the great excuse it once was to do everything and absolutely anything. Eroding civil liberties, torture, foreign wars, empire, homeland security, states, etc. That excuse is eroding.
Thanks so much for watching Part 1. Don't miss Part 2. Click here.